Hello everyone, my name is Maddie. If you are here from Instagram, then you know that last week I posted a Q&A on my Instagram story about miscarriage and grief. That was the topic. This past week was a year since I experienced my miscarriage, and so I wanted to answer some questions and talk about some frequently asked questions for miscarriage. Miscarriage, I feel like, is a very common thing, but it's still pretty taboo. Not as much as it was before, but I feel like it is something that should be talked about more. I know for me, it was definitely a huge help in my coping and healing. I didn't talk about it for about 2 months after I miscarried, and I got no closure. And after I did that, I definitely found the healing that I truly needed. So, for the first question, what do you think the gender was? I am pretty sure that the gender was a female. I'm pretty sure that my first pregnancy was a girl. The reason I think that is because with female pregnancies, you have a higher chance of finding out sooner. And with male pregnancies, you find out, you could find out really at any time, but it's just easier to find out earlier with female pregnancies because the HCG levels in a female baby are just higher because females naturally have HCG hormones. Advice for someone who has gone through or is going through a miscarriage. So my advice is to rest. That's something I did not do very well when I first miscarried. I was very, very, very shy about the subject, and so I didn't tell anybody, like, outside of my family, and I did not take the time that I needed to rest, and I participated in a church basketball tournament. Do not recommend doing that. My second tip or piece of advice is talk to someone who has experienced the same thing. I know that when I miscarried, I talked to someone who had had about 3 chemical pregnancies. And we'll get more into chemical pregnancies in a bit. We have a question about that. And so I talked to them, and that really brought me a lot of comfort because somebody else had gone through it. They already knew what was happening, and they really, really helped me. And now when I talk to people who are going through miscarriages and chemical pregnancies, I can now be a help to them, and I can encourage them. And so that's definitely an important piece of advice, I think, is to talk to someone who has gone through the same thing. And if you can't find anybody, you have me. So that's definitely nothing I wish. It's something I don't wish on anybody, but sadly, that is the world that we live in. 1 in 4 pregnancies end in a miscarriage, and that seems like it's not a big number, but it actually is, and it's definitely more than a number. It's women all over the world experiencing loss, and my heart goes out to each and every one of you, and my prayers are definitely with you for comfort and peace in such a trying time. How did you find out you were pregnant and miscarrying? So it's weird the way it happened. I found out I was miscarrying before I found out that I was actually pregnant. So I have a very, very regular cycle, and it changed, and I immediately noticed that something wasn't right. And so I was doing all kinds of research on why these certain things that were happening to me were happening, and I couldn't find anything that was remotely close to anything I was going through. And my mom had asked me if there was any chance that I was pregnant and if I was miscarrying. And I was like, well, I don't think so, because my husband and I hadn't been trying. So I didn't even think that there was a chance that I was pregnant. So I started doing research on early pregnancy loss, and everything that was on all of these different articles and websites that I was reading all lined up perfectly. So I talked to someone that I know who had their chemical pregnancies, and they just let me get everything off of my chest and tell them everything I was going through. And I appreciated that they didn't interject and tried to say, well, this is what happened to me. They let me talk about what happened to me, and then they confirmed or denied, and everything that I had said they confirmed. So I bought a pregnancy, well, actually I had my mom buy me a pregnancy test that night, and I took it immediately, and it was negative. And I told my husband, I was like, there's no way that I'm not pregnant. Like, I just don't have peace about that. And so the next morning I took my second test, and it was positive. So yeah, I found out I was miscarrying before I found out I was pregnant, if that makes sense. And I really wasn't sure if a pregnancy test was even going to be a good idea, because if I was miscarrying, then my HCG levels obviously had to have dropped. But as it turns out, when you miscarry, your HCG levels remain in your body, and they drop gradually for the next 2 weeks to a month after. A verse that helped you through it all. There's a lot of verses that have helped me, lots of songs, people that I have met simply because I also had a miscarriage. But some verses that helped me, I'll share one of them, and if you're interested in hearing some more, I would love to share them at a different time. But Psalms chapter 34, this was a chapter that has helped me through many, many difficult times in my life. But there's a verse at the end of the chapter, verse 17 and 18. It says, the righteous cry, and the Lord heareth, and delivereth them out of all their troubles. The Lord is nigh unto them that are of a broken heart, and saveth such as be of a contrite spirit. I've gone through nothing super major in my life that is super heartbreaking, but as a teenager, we often put a lot of stock in friendships and self-image and stuff like that, and love and things like that. And I went through friends that didn't like me, friends that acted like they liked me to my face, and then they talked bad about me to other people and stuff like that. And so while reading my Bible, I came across Psalms 34, and that time in my life, that was about 4 or 5 years ago, I came across this passage, and then it ended up being a much bigger blessing to me than I thought it would be, because I know that as a child of God, I have His righteousness, and I have His comfort, and I have His Holy Spirit that indwells me, and that whenever I cry to Him, He's going to be there to deliver me out of all of my troubles, and that he is nigh to me whenever my heart is broken and whenever my spirit is low. And verse 19 says, many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivereth him out of them all. And even though we go through so many things in our life, our lives that are troubling and they seem like great heavy afflictions, that God is always going to be there to deliver us out of all of our heartaches, our heartbreaks. And honestly, another thing that I had to learn was that deliverance doesn't come on Amazon Prime's shipping. We always think of like quick delivery or a 2-day delivery or 1 day or same day. And God doesn't work like that. His time clock is not our time clock. His ways are higher than ours. And sometimes it's going to take a lot of time for him to heal our hearts because we're human and he is not. And so we have to deal with the human side of heartbreak, and he is going to take care of the rest, and he's going to give us such divine comfort and healing and peace and deliverance in his time. What was something that you learned through your miscarriage? I learned that I was going to have to get out of my comfort zone if I wanted comfort. And what I mean by that is I am a very dependent person, except for when it comes to help. I like to be independent. I like to help myself. I don't like to be a burden to others. And so I don't like asking for help. And I want people to be able to read my body language or my tendencies and say, she's in distress, she needs help, I'm going to help her. And so I took that mindset of somebody needs to read my mind, and I placed that on my husband, and I reclused myself from him, hoping that he would come to my rescue. And while that does happen a lot of times, when I say I reclused myself, he was in the living room and I was in my bedroom, and I just hid in here expecting him to know something was wrong whenever I didn't let on that anything was wrong. So I found out on a Thursday morning that confirmed my pregnancy was confirmed on a Thursday morning. And so I was at peace. I could rest in knowing that my body was miscarrying a baby, and that ultimately the baby was safe. At that point, there was nothing else that I could do. And then on Friday, it was a completely different ball game. I was in shambles internally for the whole day. And when I got home, my husband and I were sitting on the couch talking, and he was like, hey, hon, I have a headache. Can you go grab me some medicine? And I was like, sure. And as soon as I stood up, I just felt so much more heaviness. And my eyes started welling up with tears. I had a lump in my throat. So I handed him the medicine and I left and I went to the room like nothing happened. I grabbed some laundry and I started folding clothes, but I was sobbing in here quietly so he would not hear me. And in my mind, I'm thinking he needs to come in here and he needs to comfort me and he needs to be a help to me. And the Lord started dealing with my heart that sometimes I'm going to have to go to him for help. And if you know anything about biblical marriage and how marriage was ordained, Christ and our husbands are a type of Christ, and we as wives are a type of the church. And sometimes we have to go, while there is always comfort and love that is bestowed on us as the church or as the wife, sometimes we have to go to the source in order to get the full help that we need. Because God is never going to force himself on us. He obviously offers us comfort through the Holy Spirit and through his word. But we have to go to him in prayer. There cannot be a disconnect between me and Christ or me and my husband. If I want comfort, if I'm putting up a wall, I'm not going to find that comfort. And so I had to swallow my pride and my independence and go be dependent upon my husband for his support. And so after 20 or 30 minutes of being in absolute emotional distress, I went to my husband. I had fake lashes on. I had eyeliner. Everything was running. My eyelashes were coming off. And my husband was like, "What's wrong?" And I just broke down even harder. And I was like, I didn't know it was going to be this hard. And my husband just took me in his arms and held me and hugged me and prayed with me and comforted me and just spoke so sweetly and softly and gently to me. And for literal months after that, he did that so often. I would just come and I'd sit next to him and he would just grab me up and he would ask me questions and talk to me about our baby that had passed and so many different things. And it was just such a comfort. Another question is, did you name the baby? So when I first had a miscarriage, a friend of mine asked me if I planned on naming it, and I said I didn't know, and I didn't know what to name it, so I just came up with like a little nickname, but that genuinely did not stick very well. I still don't have a name, but I have a theme for what I felt and how the Lord has ministered to my heart through that, and that is Jehovah Jireh. In Genesis 22, we find Abraham and Isaac, and God asks Abraham to offer Isaac as a sacrifice. In verse 20, sorry, let me find the verse. Bear with me. Verse 14. So this is after the angel of the Lord presents the ram in the thicket to Abraham and tells him not to sacrifice his son. And the Lord saw the devotion of Abraham in that he would sacrifice his own son and he would offer his son to God, because what was important to Abraham was his relationship with God. And in verse 14, it says, "And Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen." And Jireh, the meaning of Jehovah Jireh, is God will provide. And I love the last part, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And to put that in like simple layman's terms, when anybody looks at that mountain, what they're going to see is God's provision. And the same mountain is also Golgotha, in it's Mount Calvary in the New Testament, and that is where we see that God offered his son as a lamb for our atonement, for our salvation. And it says in verse 12, And he said, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And from a New Testament standpoint, God did not withhold his son from us as a sacrifice. So that way we could have access into grace. And now when we look at Mount Calvary from a believer's standpoint, we see God's provision and how we now have access to salvation, grace, comfort, mercy, all of these things. And so Jireh, which is essentially, it means provision. When I think of my miscarriage, I think of Jehovah Jireh, because even though it was hard, and I mean, nobody wants to go through a miscarriage, and I'm sure Abraham didn't want to offer his son. I'm sure he didn't want to have gone through the years that he would no longer have a son. But now he can look back. But I can look back on the instance of my miscarriage, and I can see how God has provided so much for me as far as comfort, a support group, a closeness with him like I've never felt before, an outlook on life that I didn't have before, the appreciation for life, and a love for motherhood. I have an angel baby. I have a baby in heaven, but now I can look forward to mothering the children that God will provide to me one day. And it's just so, so special to look at it from a personal standpoint, but also from a believer and a Christian's standpoint. Another question that I had is, how far along was I? And when I started miscarrying, I was 3.5 weeks. And so by the time my miscarriage was done, I was a couple days past 4 weeks. So I actually didn't go to the doctor after my miscarriage because I was so early on. And I was even asked if I was going to go have a D&C done, but I was like, no, I really don't think there's any need for that. So I was around 4 weeks, and I ended up having a doctor's appointment a couple months later that I needed to go to. And they asked me, like, is there anything that has changed in the past few months or anything like that you'd like to talk about? And so I let them know that I had a miscarriage. And prior to that, I was on birth control for about 2 months. So from September to November, I was on birth control. And then in February, I had gotten pregnant and then had the miscarriage. So a significant amount of time had passed, and I was on like the lowest dosage of birth control that you can possibly get, because I told them that I do not want anything extreme. And then even that messed my hormones up severely. So I told my husband I didn't want to be on them anymore, and he was more than happy to let me get off of them. So when I told my healthcare provider that I had a miscarriage, her response was, what about your birth control? And I said, I'm not on it anymore. And she said, why not? And I said, because I didn't like the way it made me feel, and I didn't want to deal with any long-term issues because of it. And so she was like, okay, well, how far along were you? So I broke down the timeline, and for some reason it was just going over her head, and she did not understand the timeline. And by the end of it, she was like, oh, so basically you were only a month along, so it was too early to even matter. And I was livid. I could not believe what I was hearing. I cried and I called my husband and I was like, I don't ever want to go back to the doctor again. And then I told him what happened, and he told me, he said, honey, not everyone is going to see things the way you see them, and nobody is going to actually know what you felt or appreciate or acknowledge how you felt the way that you are or that I am or somebody close to you is going to. And she's just a silly doctor, so don't even listen to her. So I was over it, and I just disregarded it because I know that it was something, and I know that there was a life and that I did lose it, and it did matter. So I just disregarded what she said. It still makes me mad though, because I can't believe that that's the medical system that we have today. Here is a great response. Amazing content, buddy. Check out my page. I think I can help you grow. That is from viralgrow.io sends. And I actually have a couple of those in here. Okay, let's see. What is a chemical pregnancy? So that's a great question. I was honestly always confused about a chemical pregnancy before having one, just because I did know people who had them, but I really didn't know much about them. And a chemical pregnancy is when the only way to confirm is through the HCG levels in your body. So you technically cannot confirm pregnancy through an ultrasound until 5 to 7 weeks. And anything before 5 weeks, you can only go off of the HCG that is found in your body. So that is what a chemical pregnancy is. It's still a pregnancy. It's no less than any other kind of miscarriage or loss. And I feel like a lot of people hear chemical pregnancy or ectopic pregnancies and they just kind of disregard it. But that's something I appreciate about social media nowadays, is there's a lot of awareness that's brought to things, and that could be good or it could be bad, but in this sense, then it's pretty good, because now people have a higher understanding of things like pregnancy and pregnancy loss, because like I said earlier, it's a very, very taboo subject. One thing you did not expect after miscarrying, that would be postpartum depression. I did not realize that even losing a baby as early as 4 weeks, you would still deal with postpartum depression. So my advice on that is eat as healthy as you possibly can. Help your body out as much as you possibly can, whether that be relaxing it, strengthening it, whatever. Also connecting with outdoors, like nature. Me and my husband started taking walks, and that really, really helped me. Finding a good book, relaxing. Everybody has a different way that they deal with depression, and I always disconnect when I'm depressed, and doing things that help me reconnect and relax is what helps me. Some people deal with depression by going to the gym or by drawing or by content creating or through music. There's so many different ways. If you just had a baby and are now dealing with postpartum depression, or if you had a miscarriage and are dealing with postpartum depression, definitely do your research, because everybody handles it differently, and everybody should take care of their bodies accordingly. So that is all that I'm going to answer for today. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to ask questions and view this video to listen to my answers. So yeah, I really hope to share more on YouTube. And please forgive me, I am not great at YouTube yet. I just started, obviously. So please like, subscribe, share, and I cannot wait to do more. So have a good day. Bye.